Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Ryan Dividock. I'm the supervisor for the Planning, Zoning, and Land Use Unit here in Oakland County. Welcome to today's virtual planners gathering, Tiny Homes in a Big City. Just a few reminders before we get started. The meeting is being recorded, and so it'll be available on our website. And if you have any questions, please use the chat function in Zoom and send your questions directly to Jim Schaefer. Jim will moderate a question and answer session after the presentation. So let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce Reverend Faith Fowler, Executive Director, Cass Community Social Services. Reverend Fowler, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation and joining all you good folks from Oakland County. So I brought a PowerPoint presentation that I frequently use. I'll try and add some narrative about the process in terms of the city, because I know that most of you are concerned with, rules and regulations for municipalities in terms of building tiny homes. I'd point out at the beginning of the presentation that most of the pictures you see in the presentation are either homes we've built or homes we are going to build soon here in Detroit. And by in Detroit, I mean just off the lodge. You may have seen one of the houses as you're driving up and down the lodge, north of Webb and south of the Davis. So we decided in 7 years ago, actually, to build tiny homes, and I'll explain why later. But each of the homes is on a lot, basically 30 by 100 square feet, because that's what the lot size is in this neighborhood. In other words, we purchased land, some from the land bank, some from the city of Detroit, and some from individual owners. And we bought it all when we opened a facility, 41 unit apartment building for formerly homeless men and women. We wanted to control the area around it. When we purchased the properties, we weren't sure what we were going to do with it. We just wanted to control our environment a little bit. Some lots cost us $1,000, which, is very inexpensive. When we were buying from private owners, it became more expensive. As we started putting up houses, the prices went up because people realized that it was something valuable now. The original goal was to build 25 homes and to make them all attractive and unique. Because affordable housing tends to be identical and ugly, is my way of putting it. This is the model for the first home that went up. It is not actually the first home, but the picture from the architect. It looks fairly similar. And I picked it just because it was pretty. I mean, I don't know, I would want to live there. Hopefully you would too. So this gives you an idea of the property we're talking about. The 41 unit apartment building we constructed is in the left-hand corner. It was a total gut rehab, low income housing tax credit deal, $10 million into what really was a gut rehab, and then the parking lot next to it. I'm not used to describing things this way. Just to the bottom of it, there's a 4-family flat that we also purchased because there was a lot of drug activity happening there, and we wanted to relocate those neighbors. So they moved elsewhere, and we moved some families in there. But as you look at the property from the left of your screen to the right of your screen, there's basically nothing. Occasionally people are critical of the project, saying, you should rehab properties instead of building new, because there's so much in the city that should be saved. And it's true, there are properties that should be saved, should be kept, should be renovated. We have done that in every building that we've worked on and now work in. Until we started building tiny homes, but there literally was nothing to rehab here. So you either have to make the choice that you'll build nothing new until everything in the whole city. At that point, there were 80,000 vacant and derelict buildings, or to do them simultaneously, to, you know, walk and chew gum at the same time. So that's where we started. And it's literally a part of our campus, which was by intention. You can again see the 41 unit apartment building sort of midway up above where the freeway is. And then the tiny homes are in that 3.5 block area. We do have the ability to go up to 40 or 45 homes. We have completed the first 25, but there's room for more, and we're starting 4 more next week. The notion is that the homes would be for low-income people, not no-income people. You can't live with no income, but low-income people, people on SSI, people with minimum wage jobs, people who are retired but are really struggling, people for whom securing a mortgage was impossible. That many of them wouldn't have cars. So to include them and incorporate them into our campus would allow them to walk, to be a pedestrian place for people to get the basic services. Now, by that, I mean food and jobs and medical attention, recreation. What the map doesn't show, I'll have to update it if we ever update the book, is just in the last year or two, we've, on the left side of the campus, renovated an old convent, which took $3 million and will make the campus slightly bigger. And we also have purchased an old Catholic church that we are in the process of converting into not only a rec center with a huge gym, but a grocery store, so that you can walk to the things and the people you need. If you don't have a car, it doesn't matter. That was part of our thinking. Now, occasionally people say to me, well, oh, I've heard they do tiny houses all over, especially for homeless people. You're just doing the same thing. We're really not. It's not to say that other people aren't doing good things. They are. Their aim was different. This is from Quixote Village, and it was the first time tiny homes for formerly homeless people used government money. And so it's a better quality of product, if you will. Each house, though, is really just a bedroom and a half bath. So they're not tiny homes, they're tiny bedrooms. And then you go to a community center where there are showers and food and, you know, TV and that sort of thing. So it's meant to, this village, and that's what they call them, is meant to replace shelters for people who refuse to go to shelter, for people who are living in encampments, for people who've been kicked out of shelters. And most of them aren't in a city. Most of them are in places where they're sort of hidden away. This one is right next to a factory, as you can see. And by not being in a city, the residents then need to go half an hour by bus to get to services and half an hour back and pay for it. Other villages, again, I'm not saying they're a bad thing, but they're a different thing. Other villages are by an airport or by a prison, but they're meant to be a substitute for shelters. And we, CAS, community, run shelters. I wasn't interested in operating another or newer or different kind of shelter. Instead, I wanted to create a program that would allow folks who don't qualify for a mortgage to become homeowners. So people who live on $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a year can't even get into a Habitat home. I'm not criticizing Habitat homes. They are wonderful and their philosophy is terrific, but our people didn't make enough money to qualify for the mortgage. So we wanted to set up a program, and it is truly a program for low-income people. And it's a 7-year program that during which time they have financial literacy, they have chances to learn about home ownership. If you've never owned a home before, you don't know about cleaning gutters and changing filters and all that good stuff. You don't know about property taxes, or that your water bill could determine whether or not you stay in your house. For 7 years, they have to live in the house, and that was a big controversy, by the way, because we didn't think of it at first, that if you didn't have an income, you might live somewhere else and just pick this up on the side. They're meant for people to live in. And if you do those 3 additional things for 7 years, you pay rent $1 a square foot. Our houses are between 225 square feet, and I think the largest now is 500, and we won't go beyond that. Then we give you the house. We use your money during the 7-year program to pay most of your bills. We pay your water, we pay your grass cutting, we pay your snow removal, we pay your security system, we pay your DTE appliance protection program, we pay your insurance, we pay your taxes, we pay your garbage collection, all those things. So the program was never set up for Cass to make money on it. Actually, the program was set up, organized so that we would break even. But the homeowner pays rent, and he or she pays their electric bill. And I would point out, everything in the house, the houses we build anyway, is electric. There's no gas into the house at all. And every house has its own solar array, so that it, during the summer, eliminates your DTE bill. During the spring and fall, it reduces it dramatically. And then in the winter, it reduces it some. We can do that because we don't use any government money in this program. I didn't want the government, first of all, initially they weren't interested. But second of all, I didn't want them designing a bunch of rules for people they didn't know. So I told you that the people are all low income. But beyond that, we targeted, if you will, I know target's a bad word, but we gave special priority to people who have been unhoused and or incarcerated and or grew up in foster care or were senior citizens. In other words, we wanted to create a neighborhood or community that wasn't just one thing. We didn't want people to drive by and say, this is where the homeless live. We thought there's a richness in that diversity, that they would come to rely on each other, much like other neighborhoods do, because you get to know your neighbors through regular contact, but you get to know that other people have skills and experiences that you don't have. The seniors rely on the young people for, at the beginning of COVID, to get on Zoom and grandparent type advice, and people have been incarcerated for long periods of time. And we had one man who was locked up for over 30 years, and then to come out and try and make sense of life again, took the neighbors sort of schooling him and helping him. And that's been terrific. So even as renters, if they've come from the shelter, their life changes automatically. In a shelter situation, everything is determined for you. I don't know if you've been in a shelter lately, but much of it is controlled by government. What lights can be turned on and off, where you can smoke, when you can shower or wash your clothes, when you can have company, whether or not you can have animals, whether you can smoke inside. All of those things are determined by policies from Washington or Lansing, or in our case, Detroit. And so you don't have much control over your own life. If you've been homeless or if you've been incarcerated, the day you get the key to the house that you're renting, you control all of those things. You want a cat, a dog. I hate cats, so I hope you get a dog. We have 6 dogs now and 1 turtle. You want to stay up all night. You want to run your music loud at night. You want to have company. You want to have romantic overnight. You're a grown-up. I'm not in charge of that. So all of a sudden, there's a great freedom and independence, even though you're a renter. How do we build the homes? First of all, we use universal building codes. We don't want to put up junk. We need these houses to last, because in 7 years, we're not going to own them anymore. So we hire a general contractor. In this next round, it's Templeton out of Birmingham. The president of the company was the president of the Michigan Builders Association, a really good man. Then he hires the electricians and the plumbers and the people who have the licenses we need to build the homes properly and to have good, solid construction. Then we use volunteers. Many organizations, religious organizations especially, have teams of people who know how to do things that save us a ton of money, like drywall and flooring and putting in cabinets and painting and landscaping. Metro Detroit sends mission teams all around the world to do these things, so I know that they're good at it. Corporations also come, Ford, GM, Ally Financial, AT&T. Also, for a while, Habitat Humanity of Detroit was shut down, and they lent us some, very skilled volunteers. And that not only, keeps your costs down, curbs your expenses, but it creates sort of evangelists for what you're doing. They tell others and send others. And those networking possibilities pay off. So these are models of two of the homes we built. The one on the left is a Victorian, obviously. I saw that picture online and fell in love with it, and then couldn't find the blueprints. So I was in Ann Arbor talking at a Rotary meeting, and after the meeting, a man came up to me and explained that he was an architect, and if I ever needed help. And so I pulled that picture out of my briefcase and said, "Can you draw me this house?" And since then, he for free has been drawing houses for us, interiors, or modifying them as we need them. So people really want to, everybody understands the value of having a home, right? So it's not something you have to do a lot of explaining about. The one on the right is an also really good example of a woman who approached me. She lives in West Michigan. They were tearing down their barn. Could we use the barn wood? Well, heck yeah, it makes a very lovely exterior once you seal it, and makes a nice rural urban connection, and saved us from buying all that siding. We simply had to drive a truck to the middle of nowhere and pick up a barn and bring it back. The other thing is contractors very often have extras at the end of a job that they don't want to pay to haul off. So bricks, pavers, decking, paint. It doesn't take much paint to paint a tiny house. Even roofs, not only shingles, but we've received some metal roofs from contractors. If you're doing a big facility, part of a restaurant or a shopping facility, to have enough roofing material to do a 200, 300 square foot house isn't much. They get a tax write-off and we get free materials. Even in Grosse Pointe, a woman said to me after a speech one night that she was redoing her kitchen. Could we use some granite countertops? Well, heck yeah. I don't have granite countertops, but many of the tiny homes do. Again, the homeowner, taxpayer, gets a write-off. The homeowner at Cass gets granite countertops, and we don't have to pay for it. So it's amazing how the community has been responsive to these needs. All of our houses are on slab-on-grade foundations. There's a reason for that. You probably know in the city of Detroit, the population in the late 60s was about 1.5 million, 1.6 million, maybe even a little bit higher, maybe 1.8 million, and now is at about 700,000. Which means a lot of people left the city, but also that a lot of houses were razed and continue to be torn down. Unfortunately, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and I think even 90s, when they took the houses down, they buried them in the basements, which means it's very expensive to take everything out. You want to make it secure for the houses, but to dig it all up would add a tremendous price tag to each and every house. So we decided to go on slab on grade. Again, occasionally we get criticized because on HGTV you can, put it on wheels and take it anywhere you want. That's great unless you're poor. If you're poor, you probably don't own a 150 truck and you don't own land, and the state isn't going to let you park it on Belle Isle. So it really isn't a good option. The other thing is anything on wheels, as we know, we live in the Motor City, depreciates the moment you drive it off the lot. We wanted something that would appreciate over time, so we wanted stationary homes. Each house has a front porch or back deck to increase the living space. I know it's Michigan, it's cold in the winter, but to get outside in the other seasons is wonderful. Every house comes fully equipped with all the appliances. We have a mini split heater that we switched to halfway through the process because it's much cheaper to run, more expensive to put in, but cheaper to run. Hot water on demand because it doesn't occupy floor space. You want to utilize all the floor space you can. And then all the furnishings, unless they don't want them, there's no charge for them. There's no charge not to have them. Oops, bad. They work really hard on landscaping. If they need help, we get volunteers to help them. Every house comes with a security system. There's a good story about the company out of Grosse Pointe that gave us a terrific deal. So they control, who comes into their house, who doesn't. The police are called. There's no bars to make it look like a prison anymore. So we started in 2016. We now have the 25 houses done. The one you see from the freeway probably is the tall one on the bottom of your screen. We call it the lighthouse. That's not what the architect called it, but that's what we call it. The first floor is actually a garage, and the tiny home is up above. We hope in the next 2.5 years to be at 40 or 45. It went crazy on the internet. Not that we tried to make it do that, but it had 90 million views. Some guy in California turned it into a video and included information. Some of it's not even true. He didn't even talk to us before it went out. But what it meant is that we were getting calls and emails. It's like everybody wanted to be on Oprah. Don't dream of being, I know she's not on anymore, but don't dream of being on Oprah. You won't be able to keep up with the number of people calling, for information. There's just not enough time. So we did write the book, and it's done okay. But mainly it's this is what we did. This is the process we used. We contacted zoning in the city of Detroit first, because I didn't want to start developing a plan that the city was going to reject. The thing about the city of Detroit is there was at that time no minimum requirement, meaning you could build tiny homes in Detroit for even a smaller space. You could build a 50-foot tiny home. We wanted houses that people wanted to live in long term, and so we decided, to start at 200, 225. We also wanted to make them small enough so people who are very poor but have an income could become a homeowner. But that was where we started, and that's where we recommend other people start. And in the book, there's a list of sort of the steps to help you anticipate what you've got to do. In Detroit, you have setbacks of 7 feet on each side, which if you weren't building tiny homes, you would have had to buy 2 lots and tether them together. So do you know the setback requirements of your neighborhood? All those kinds of issues. Some areas are never going to have tiny homes. They just don't want them. They're not in my backyard, NIMBY kind of issue. Other places need some convincing. I'm here to tell you, young people are, we get requests every single day. Would you just sell us one? We get requests from real estate agents. Would you help us design something in our area? We get people coming through touring, taking pictures, taking videos because they're interested in doing something on their property or their city because they care about the environment. We are much better for the environment than a typical home. An average home today, or at least in 2015, was 2,600 square feet. Ours is 325. So what that means is it's much less of a tax on the environment to build the houses and to operate the houses. So people who care about, the planet for the next several generations are very interested in tiny homes. Or I know you've heard about units for parents or in the backyards. Some are interested in doing them that way as well. But if I had 1,000 tiny homes, I could rent them all tomorrow. Each home, as I mentioned, has solar behind it, and it makes a big difference, and it makes a statement about, again, the environment. You may want to know, I'm going to turn this off now because I think I've completed it. You may want to know that the building of the houses was much cheaper before the pandemic. As you know from living, everything's gone sky high. Getting construction finished during the pandemic was terribly hard. But the houses, according to Zillow anyway, right now are valued at between $80,000 and $100,000, which may sound like nothing in your community. In our community, it raised the property value. The last time anything was built in this section of Detroit was 1973, and it was a garage. So the neighbors are ecstatic to see new housing going in and going up, and new people repopulating an area that had been deserted. We're exactly half a mile from where the rebellion or riots in Detroit started. So it took a terrible toll on this neighborhood. And so the new density is the reason we can talk about offering a community center and a grocery store and financial services, and because all of a sudden there are people who will use them here, and that feels good. We've made a big dent in the drug activity. I was saying before the actual session started, I know that $100,000 may seem really bad in terms of property values for your community, but I also know they put up a tiny home in Philadelphia with all the bells and whistles. I think it cost them $250,000 to build, and they sold it for $500,000. So there is an interest in having more options in terms of housing, and it's not for everyone, but there are people who want them, and younger people especially, environmentalists especially, people who can't afford the price tag on much of the housing stock that's available today would be interested. And it becomes, we used to talk about starter homes, right? HGTV doesn't do that anymore, but people do need something to get started, to have an asset. Again, if you moved in and your annual income was $8,000 or $9,000 on SSI, maybe 10, you probably didn't even have a bicycle. And then this September, the first people will own their homes, and they'll have an asset worth $80,000 to $100,000. They literally get the deed, and they stop paying rent. They pay their own bills. We know they can pay their bills because that's what we've done with their rent money for 7 years. And they can use it as collateral like the rest of us do, right? You go to the bank, you want to get something else or send your kid to school or whatever, you can use it as collateral. They can sell it and move somewhere else. They're gonna do well if they decide that's their future, or they can put it in their will. So for the first time, it's meant the American dream has come true, that you can deal with poverty on a generational basis, right? That if you're inheriting something worth 80 or $100,000, your life is dramatically different than if you're inheriting nothing. So that's the program. It's 7 years old. It's open. It's not a gated community. If you ever just want to drive through it and see how it feels or looks, I would invite you to. The only thing I would ask is don't go knocking on people's doors. They really have lived in a fishbowl for a long time now. Most are pretty good about answering questions if you catch them between the car and their front door, but they deserve privacy. We don't do tours once they've moved in. If we get something vacant, we have somebody coming, we certainly would show it to you, but once they're in, it's their home, and we try and respect that. Okay, I think I'm good for questions if there are a couple.
Excellent, excellent presentation, Reverend Fowler. Thank you. Yeah, we do have a number of questions. First off, what, if any, zoning or master plan changes were needed to take place to allow the tiny home development?
Yeah, as I say, so often we run into issues with the city. The convent we just put $3 million into, and they won't let us put a sign on the building. So we're used to getting some pushback occasionally from our city. We got none. Once I had zoning out, we didn't have any. Now, like any other new construction, we had to turn in signed architectural plans and get them through the building process, right? So the city comes out and inspects, just like any other construction. They inspect the plumbing and electrical and heating and cooling, and then there's a final inspection before the occupancy is granted. Here in Detroit, we have a renters thing, so every other year we have to have them inspected, which is good for the tenant, by the way. So they know when they get the house, it's in good condition still. But we really didn't. I know across the country that's not true. I know some people in some places have had to fight and show that it could be real housing and not just shelters, or not just temporary housing, right? Many places have 1,000 square foot cutoff. So to go below that, you'd have to change the rules. And it has happened someplace. Over time, there's become much more of a acceptability of them. But we haven't faced problems from the city with this project.
Okay.
Actually, we're
Next question. Oh,
okay.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Next question. Are all of your homes stick built, or do you prefab any of them?
No, all stick built. We have one that's out of a shipping container, and one that's a log cabin home. But we wanted them stick built, A, to provide employment, and B, for the community to see what construction looks like. Because again, they hadn't seen any for decades. So to build right on site was important to us.
Okay. What about the costs of repair and maintenance of the tiny homes? What are you finding in terms of how that's going?
Yeah, so the biggest issue for us was the heating and cooling. Initially, we put in what's called a PTAC unit, which is like what you'd see in a hotel. It goes out the wall, and because of the small sizes of the houses, we were told going in that that would be adequate, and it was. I mean, it gave you both heat and air. The problem was it was very expensive to run. And one of the factors that went into our decision was that it would be easy for people to replace once they own the homes. They run about $1,000. But because they're, even with solar, their electric bill was so high, especially during the winter, we decided to put in a dual split mini unit, and it runs about $10,000. So it'll be harder for them to replace when they get to the point of replacing it, but it reduced their electric bill in the winter to a third of what it was. So that was a big learning thing for us. We haven't had major, because they're brand new houses, little things. We put on storm doors just to try and bring down the heating costs before we went to the mini split. Some of the people have accumulated a bunch of stuff, so we started putting up some sheds, not garages, but sheds, especially those with kids. Had a lot of outside things they wanted to store, so we did that. So we haven't had many building problems per se. We
Okay.
had to run in water lines and electric lines, just as if it was virgin territory, because it had been vacant so long and the lines were no longer good. So that was very expensive. To pour the foundation, which is cement, costs about 20 grand. So every once in a while, somebody will say, oh, you can build a tiny house for 10 grand. No, you can't. You really, not if you're building a tiny house. Pre-COVID, we were running about 65,000. Now we're north of that.
Okay. Question about the internal design. How do you avoid shotgun style floor plans?
Yeah, so even though every house is different inside and outside, there are basically three designs that it can be composed of. One is oh my goodness, one is a one bedroom, right? Especially for seniors, they love that. It's all on the same floor. It's very easy to make these homes ADA accessible. We have a couple that are, but even when they're not, to add a ramp for a step or two is nothing. To, make a door wider is nothing. Some are studio, so everything's in the same room, kitchen, living, dining, and then a separate bedroom. And then some are lofts where the bedroom or there's space upstairs. Primarily those go to the younger adults, because the older we get, the less likely we are to scale stairs up to a loft. But even though those are the three designs per se, no house looks alike inside either. They're very, very different.
Okay. What is the starting price on a 1 to 2 bedroom home?
So we don't sell them. You can't buy them from us anyway. Again, here's the deal. You say, first of all, we use fair housing. You fill out an application when the process is open. We have a screening committee that ranks them and interviews the people and checks the references and does the vetting. By the way, well, I already told you, we have people who've been in prison. The only thing we don't have is somebody with a conviction of a sexual crime, just because we have children on campus who are very vulnerable, and we wouldn't want anyone hurt. So then you're screened. We do use the HUD yardstick, if you will, that we don't want to take more than a third of your income for housing. And so that may determine what size house we're able to offer you. We don't want you to fail. We want you to get it. I forgot what the original question was. Can you help me?
Well, it's basically value.
Okay. So let me say it again. I thank you. So they pay the rent and they participate in the program for the 7 years. At the end of 7 years, there is no mortgage. There is no balloon. There's no qualifying. We come to you and we say, here's your deed. You're now a homeowner. But you have to participate. You have to live in the house and you have to participate in the program. So they never pay for the house. They don't have to. I've raised the money to build the houses from private sources. They don't want their money back. We don't need their money. We want to set them up for success. And so we have, we've debated, because this September is the first time we hand them deeds. We have struggled a little bit with how that happens. We included them, meaning the residents and the staff and the board at CAS, into thinking through, well, do we want this to be a co-op or a land trust, or do we want this to be some other something? And the residents said, nope, we just want to own it. Okay, so then we'll honor that. But then should we put in some deed restrictions? Because, you know, you want the neighborhood to thrive, and it impacts everything else we're doing. So there are only two restrictions. One is that you can't turn it into a business. You can be a landlord and rent it out. You can't turn it into an Airbnb. The last thing we wanted is 25 houses that are Airbnbs right next to each other, where every weekend there's a different party. Two is you can do an addition to the home, but you can't make the home more than, I think it's 700 square feet. Most people consider a tiny home less than 1,000 square feet. So we wanted them to have the ability, if they were staying in the house, to add a bedroom or add a bigger living room or add whatever, without changing the composition of the neighborhood as being a tiny home area. The other thing we're working with lawyers on is we want to make sure that they're not sold to a developer who's going to turn around and gentrify the neighborhood. That we've seen that happen in neighborhoods, and it was never meant to be Birmingham and Detroit. It's just not. Now, is that to say middle income and high income people aren't welcome? Nope, they're welcome. They want to live in this neighborhood. Hallelujah, right? But we don't want a developer buying all 25 homes and then turning them into, whatever. So we're working with the lawyer to see how that can be put in a deed restriction, but otherwise the house is theirs. That was the deal.
All right. Lifespan of a tiny house, do you expect it to be somewhat analogous to a typical stick-built home?
Yeah, so I don't know yet. The oldest ones are 7 years old. We've done minor things. We've done painting and gutter repair and tree trimming and that sort of thing. I would think at least 50 years. I don't know. I mean, they were built to the same standard as everybody else's homes.
Okay.
So,
Noticing with the homes with lofts that there are ladders. Are there different codes for those houses to make those allowable? And do you have some with stairways?
no, just yes, we have some with stairways. You've got to have a window if it's a bedroom. Again, it's universal building code. So that's what we follow. We use real architects to make sure the plans follow the regulations, and everything passes through the city of Detroit, through all their departments before we get permission to build.
Okay. This is not a question, it's a comment, but the fantastic mechanism for building wealth. And next question, do any of the homes have first floor bedrooms for those who cannot navigate ladders?
Yes, absolutely. So probably we have lofts in about a third of the homes. The other homes are either studio or one bedroom. And we have people who like both. I'm trying to think, one of the smallest houses is occupied by a woman who is a senior citizen who had been sort of tossed back and forth between her daughters, living in just a bedroom in each house. And so she's delighted to have a very small, for me, it might even be too small, but for her, she's quite happy. We have, as I say, 2 ADA compliant houses, but most of them could be made ADA compliant if you were aging in place, right? Which is a big thing now. Not having to leave if you didn't want to leave. The other thing is, I'm getting great pressures from the seniors community. Would we build some just for seniors? Because in the city of Detroit, we're not Chicago or LA or New York. We are not a city of apartment buildings. That people in Detroit worked primarily for the car company. They worked in the unions, they joined the middle class, and people bought a home. And so these seniors, they don't want the big homes they've been living in for 40, 50 years, but they still want a yard. They still want a dog. They still want. So we're trying to think of how many of the next round of homes we can do for seniors so that they can have a community within a community, if you will. And then, you know, having them all ADA compliant allows them to stay as long as they want.
Okay. This is kind of a follow-up to your conversation that you're having regarding selling. If a homeowner chooses to sell their tiny home after 8 or 9 years, is there a requirement that the seller gives right of first refusal to a targeted cohort of prospective buyers, or is there any mechanism for shared equity recapture?
No, the only thing, this is the other thing I've got the lawyer working on, is if they should lose their house due to arrearages on water or taxes, we would like to buy it back because we don't want it just going up for bid. And I don't think that's possible. But otherwise, no, you can sell it to anybody at this point. Hopefully you won't be able to sell it to a developer.
Okay. There's a thank you for your work and your presentation. And a question is, Reverend Fowler, how did you get into this line of work?
I was looking for something that was lucrative, and just I'm a minister. I'm a minister at a church that's very poor, that works with homeless individuals and developmentally disabled individuals and just poor people. And the truth is, and I've been there 30 years, so a long time. And I listen to people and I watch people, and I've seen them struggle with things that most of us in the middle class don't struggle with. And then when my mom died, I realized, if you're in the middle class, you get a boost financially, even though emotionally you've taken. You get money, you get jewelry, you get a house or a car. And what a difference that makes generationally, right? And by the way, most African Americans haven't had that. So I thought, well, maybe this would work. I mean, Detroit, I call it the land of opportunity because we have so much land. And so it works here. Every once in a while I get a call from LA. Could you help us solve the homeless problem? I doubt it, because the cost of land in LA is so expensive. Even if you're working a job or two, you're probably sleeping in the parking lot at Walmart, right? So each area is a little bit different, but you have to listen to the people to find out what the problems are and think about solutions with them, and be willing, to fail. My biggest critics, well, it's not perfect. No, it's not. It was an experiment. It's worked. I mean, it's worked because I now know that 2 people next month are getting their deed. It's worked. But if you're afraid of failure, you don't try anything. You just let it go on the way it is. But it really came from the death of my mother and getting things that, quite frankly, I didn't need, but recognizing what a difference it makes in a family. And if we could provide that little slice of the American dream to people who have been denied it for whatever reason, then, and I'm going to be honest with you, after 30 years, you feel like if I run the soup kitchen one more day, what difference does it make? It makes a difference if you're hungry, but what difference does it make in the long term? And this tiny home project, it does that. I know when I retire, 25 or 45 families will have been given a ladder to climb out of poverty. I don't climb for them, but providing that opportunity for them. And at the same time, you asked about the city. At the same time, we've taken 25 or 45 lots that were feral, vacant forever, and put them back on the city tax rolls. We've taken a neighborhood that felt defeated and deserted and said, hey, there's a future. We can demand some services and amenities and restaurants and, all that before was satisfied with drug dealers. It feels really good, I think. And to do it in such a way that it's good for the planet. I don't know. Is there anything better?
All right. Um, with the yards being as small as they are, did you look at or consider mounting the solar on roofs? And who is responsible for the ongoing maintenance of the solar? Uh, well, there's multiple questions here, so why don't you go ahead and hit that first? Did you consider roof mounted?
I didn't, because we put so much time and thought into doing houses that were eye-catching inside and out. That I didn't want to obstruct that from each other. And I think the roof mounted, plus it would have, when you need to put a new roof up, then you got to take the solar down. And so we did these arrays. Quite frankly, the people park underneath them. So it blocks the sun and blocks the snow and that sort of thing. The one thing the residents are clamoring for, and I really haven't had the money for, is fencing. The people with dogs and the people with kids. I told them not to have sex, but some of them had kids, and so they would like fencing. And eventually, I'm going to have to figure out a way. I mean, just to do half a block is 50 grand. So we'll figure out a way to do it, but I haven't figured it out yet because most people don't want to give money to fencing. They want to give money to building a house, right? I get it, but the residents want fencing.
Okay.
Uh,
Who's responsible for maintaining the solar?
so we put it in Strawberry Solar, put in we paid for it, but it's a Detroit company, and if we ever have trouble, that they would come and repair it.
Okay. Street trees help to reduce cooling costs in addition to many other benefits. Have you considered, or is there a reason why street trees were not added to the lots?
Um, No, and they'll get added eventually. We've put in some. The truth is, one of the big trees that remains, the woman complains every single meeting that we have that the birds are pooping on her car. So trees aren't beloved in our community right this second, but we have been working with Greenie of Detroit on our campus and have every intention of adding more trees. We do have master gardeners who donate some time to help those who don't have a green thumb, because we like it to have flowers and bushes and that sort of thing. We don't have to encourage them to put out Christmas decorations or Easter decorations or graduation decorations or even political signs. They are all over it, and they're very competitive, by the way. Who has the most, it's like the Chevy Chase movie, a Christmas movie for the lights. Yeah, it's something.
All right. Well, that is the last question that I see in the chat. So, Ryan, if you want to close us up.
Yeah, I just want to thank Reverend Fowler for joining us today, and all of you as well. I wanted to mention we do have another planners gathering next month on September 24th, where we'll talk about Oakland County's materials management plan update. So again, thanks for joining us and have a wonderful day.